Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We just expect the attendee to join, and then we will start momentarily. So hello everybody, my name is Teresa Wu. I'm your host today. With us, we have an exciting speaker talk about facial recognitions. But before that, I'm just gonna do a little intro about woman identity, and then and some of the details on what we're gonna do next, and then we move on to the webinar. So just a little bit housekeeping. Please have your microphone on mute. Everyone will be on mute except the presenters. You will not be on the video today. And if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand in the interface. When you ask the questions, please do identify yourself. That will help a lot. All the webinars are being recorded for members who cannot attend, and we will make it available on the Women Identity YouTube channels. But we do want to have your feedback. Please complete the survey at the end of the webinar. It's very important for us to hear from you and support our diversity agenda. Okay. So who are we? So we formally registered just 1 year ago. So we actually have quite young organizations. We are no profit. We're led entirely by volunteer. We have right now 1,100 members across the world. We have 18 country ambassadors, and we have 4,500 followers and growing. So do follow us and support this exciting group. So our mission is to inspire, elevate, and support a more diversity workforce in the digital identity industry, so that the digital identity solution are being built for everyone, are built by everyone. So we are here to support you, and we have done a series of webinars before in the May-August timeframe. Some of these are the prior webinar we have. Please, you now can find them on the YouTube channel. And to follow us, these are hashtags to follow us on Twitter and also on LinkedIn. So what's next step we encourage you to do is be seen, be heard, be supported, be a catalyst for change. Become a member. Membership is free, and women and men are welcome to join us. Our group, we want to thank our sponsor. This company have been providing financial support to our organizations, not just financial, but also people. So we are very grateful and thankful for their contribution. So for today's event, we're going to talk about demographic effect on facial recognitions. We have Mei Ang from NIST. Going to talk about the different the tests that they have conducted so far and help maturing the biometric industry. So personally, I from academia cannot say enough the work that NIST has done for the biometric industry. But next one, in 2 weeks, we're going to do another one called Liar Dividend, how personal data can be used for digital lies. That's an exciting presentation. So hopefully you can attend that one as well. So please share feedback and contribute and participate. All right, so May, I'm going to hand it over to you for the presentation.
Okay, let me share my screen here.
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and I am going to mute my video as well.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Ngan, and I'm a researcher at NIST, and I'm quite happy to be here today. I want to thank Teresa and Women Identity for having me here today. Can you guys see my screen okay?
I can see it perfectly.
Okay, so I am going to stop video here. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about the work that we did around a bit of a recent hot topic here, which is demographic effects in face recognition. So without further ado, first a little bit about where I work. I work at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, also known as NIST. NIST is a physical sciences laboratory and a non-regulatory agency of the United States Department of Commerce. And our mission is to promote innovation and industrial competitiveness and work on standards and measurements, essentially. And our activities are organized into lab programs, which includes nanoscale science and technology, engineering, information technology, which is the lab that I work in, neutron research, material measurement, and physical measurement. And an interesting fact about where I work is that we actually have a small nuclear reactor on site that's actually used to provide a steady supply of neutrons used to explore the structure and dynamics of novel materials. Okay, so no NIST presentation goes without a chart on how NIST came about. And out of all the stories that I've heard, the Baltimore fire of 1904 is the one that has stuck with me the most. And at the time, the fire burned down 24 blocks in the city near Baltimore. Fire brigades came to help from nearby cities, including DC, New York, and Philly, but they found that their equipment was useless when they got to Baltimore. Why was that? Well, each manufacturer of hydrants and fire hoses used different hose connections at the time, and the hoses from the different places would not fit on the Baltimore fire hydrants. So the city burned and burned while the firefighters just watched sort of helplessly. And this was one of the contributing events that led to the establishment of the National Bureau of Standards, which is what we know as NIST today. Since we are talking about demographics, here is a demographic breakdown of the people who work here at NIST based on ethnicity and sex. And NIST is extremely supportive of diversity, and there are ongoing diversity initiatives to try and bring people in of different backgrounds. And I know that the lab that I work in is always trying to recruit, qualified minorities and female engineers and scientists. Okay, so NIST has been doing work in the area of face recognition for over 2 decades now. And our flagship benchmark is what we call the Face Recognition Vendor Test, FRVT. And FRVT is an ongoing test. Developers send their algorithms to NIST, and we test them on any number of sequestered data sets that presumably have not ever been seen by the developers. And then we publish measurements and numbers, which include accuracy, speed, resource consumption, and a number of analysis points that we feel would be useful to end users and developers. Right now, our FRVT test includes 4 tracks, a one-to-one track, a one-to-many track, face image quality assessment track, and a morph detection track. And we've published a number of reports out of our tests, including demographics, of course, and recently face recognition with face masks. And I may talk a little bit about that depending on if there's time at the end of this webinar. And I will add and modify tracks as we see fit based off of the needs of the community. And our tests are free and open worldwide, and we have a large percentage of the commercial market who have participated in our tests. And generally, we don't do policy, we don't do regulations, we just publish numbers. And we let the readers use the information however it applies to their operations. Okay, first I'd like to introduce some terminology on what we're talking about here. In face recognition, one-to-one verification essentially tests core algorithmic operation. We're asking the question, are 2 images of the same person or not? And given 2 images, the algorithms output a match score. And in face recognition, comparing 2 photos of the same person should generate a high score. And comparing photos of different people should generate a low score. So given a pair of images of the same person, here up the top, if the algorithm generates a score above some predetermined match threshold, then it would be considered a correct match. If the score falls below the match threshold, then what we have is what we call a false negative or a false rejection. Similarly, given images of different people, if the algorithm generates a score that is below the match threshold, then that would be a correct rejection. But if the match score is above threshold, then what we have is what we call a false positive. And keep in mind that different errors have different implications for the system owner and for the user, depending on the application. In one-to-one verification applications, for example, false negatives cause inconvenience for the user. For example, a false negative may cause someone to not be able to get into their phone. But these errors can usually be, fixed or remediated with the second or third attempt. False positives, though, on the other hand, they present a security concern to the system owner. So if someone else gets into your phone, now they have unauthorized access to your data and information on the phone. Now, in what we call a one-to-many identification scenario, we have a database of enrolled people, and we search a probe against the gallery. And we want to know, is this person in the gallery or not? And what gets returned is a candidate list of all the people that matched that search probe above some sort of threshold. So in the example I have here at the top, we have what we call a mated search. So when we search someone who is known to be in the gallery, if the mate is returned on the candidate list, then we have a correct hit. In the scenario where the correct mate is not returned on the candidate list, then we have what we call a false negative. On the bottom is the case where we have a non-mated search, where we search someone who's known not to be in the database. And you wouldn't expect the algorithm to produce any candidates. But in the event that a non-mated search produces candidates, then that generates a false positive. We've seen significant reductions in face recognition error rates over the past few years. These results chart face recognition error rates on a set of well-controlled portrait photos. And we see here that in 2017, the error rates were just below 3%. And over the years, the error rates are approaching zero, but they aren't zero. And this has to do with recognition failure in babies, which remains a very challenging issue. But for the most part, the leading face recognition algorithms can be quite accurate on full frontal, well-controlled images. Now on to demographic differentials. So I'll start off by giving a real-life example of a declared instance of demographic differentials. When they first announced the Apple Face ID software, iPhone 10, I believe, which I'm sure a number of us use multiple times a day to get onto our phones, they claimed that their algorithm operates at a false match rate of 1 in a million, meaning given any imposter attempt to get onto your phone, they have a 1 in a million chance of breaking in. Well, a few weeks later, some anecdotes that appeared in the press of children unlocking their parents' phone and young people unlocking each other's phones, they put this statement out saying the false match rate among children under the age of 13, because their distinct facial features may not have fully developed, the false match rate of 1 in a million doesn't apply. So they think that face recognition gives higher false positive rates in children under 13. So here we've got two different demographics already. We've got demographic A, under 13, giving higher false positive rates. And then there's the rest of us in demographic B with the false positive rate of apparently 1 in a million. Now, Georgetown set the stage with a very influential report on potential demographic biases in face recognition. They published a report called the Perpetual lineup, which criticized unregulated police use of face recognition in the United States. And one aspect of criticism was the possibility of racial bias or demographic bias, which would impinge on people's civil liberties. So in response to this report, one of our partner government agencies asked us to look at this demographic bias problem to see to what extent that it's real. Now, each of these blue boxes represents a part of a face recognition system life cycle. And I just want to point out that you can have demographic effects creeping in all sorts of stages in this life cycle. And all the steps that we have listed here, some of them don't necessarily include any AI or machine learning at all. We don't need there to be artificial intelligence or machine learning for there to be demographic differentials. A poorly programmed system with inappropriately set up parameters could impose a demographic problem. And the work we did and published last December concentrated on the big box here labeled recognition, but other stages could attract trouble too. So starting to the left here, prior probability, who gets put into the database in the first place matters. So the prior probability of who's in the database matters. If you put more faces of a particular group in a database, you're more likely to find people in those groups in a search, broadly speaking. We don't address that, but it's out there. And the camera or sensor used to take the face image matters. Here we have from our colleagues from DHS Science and Technology Directorate, they ran this biometrics rally where they were interested in systems that can take group pictures quickly. So they had this very controlled test setting where they had developers come in, about a dozen of them, to install their capture systems. And these are some of the pictures of some of the people taken from 3 different systems, likely minutes apart from each other. And you can see that the images are qualitatively substantially different, right? You would imagine that the recognition error rates in the second column, camera in the middle, would be higher than, say, the images collected in the first column. The point here is you can have demographic effects in face recognition that has nothing to do with face recognition algorithms, but everything to do with cameras. Bias can potentially happen during what we call quality assessment, for example, when the algorithm is checking to see if it, an image can properly detect a well-lit, proper face. The New Zealand Passport Office got written up a few years ago by the press here. A guy submitted this photo to get a passport and got rejected because their automated face quality checker said the guy's eyes were closed and told him to submit a different photo with his eyes open. Clearly his eyes aren't closed, but this is a potential for a sort of race-based differential outcomes from processing images. Again, keep in mind that this still has nothing to do with face recognition. It has to do with quality assessment. Okay, so back to the slide. We've covered some of these categories already. We can also run into trouble during face detection and feature extraction if the photo itself is overexposed or underexposed. Then we get to the recognition part of the pipeline. Different types of errors in recognition has different outcomes associated with it. For example, in a one-to-one scenario where you're trying to use face recognition to get onto your phone, false rejection or false negative can cause inconvenience, but what you normally do is you make a second or third attempt. A false positive, though, is a security hole because now someone else has gotten onto your phone. And if there is a demographic differential, it could mean lower security for one demographic, higher security for a different demographic, as sort of stated by Apple. And in a one-to-many setting, say you're searching someone against a blacklist, a false negative would result in a mislead. But the cost of a false positive could be the wrong person is potentially identified as a bad guy. And then there's human adjudication that could potentially come with potential demographic differentials as well. So NIST put out a report on demographic differentials last December. The main report is about 80 pages and then supported by over like 1,000 pages of annexes with individual algorithm results. We evaluated 187 algorithms from about 100 developers, and we tested both one-to-one and one-to-many mode, and measured both false positive and false negative rates. We measured the accuracy of algorithms for demographic groups defined by sex, age, and race or country of birth, using 4 really large data sets of photographs collected in United States governmental applications, which added up to about 18 million images across a population about 8 million people. The data came with fairly rich metadata, which allowed us to evaluate and analyze performance across a number of labels and groups. So this is generally the scope of our work. What we didn't do is we didn't train algorithms. The algorithms were run as they were submitted to us with no modifications. We reported numbers, but we didn't analyze cause and effect of the results. The study didn't consider the effect of cameras, and we didn't test on wild unconstrained images. All of the images were of cooperative subjects looking at the camera. So one of the major outcomes of the demographic study was we found there were much larger demographic differentials in false positive rates compared to false negative rates. False negatives tended to be more algorithm specific, and they varied often by a factor of less than 3. But the results here will be focused on false positive rates. And we measure false positive rates by doing a whole bunch of imposter comparisons, so making comparisons of different people, then measuring how often the algorithm incorrectly thinks there's a match. And we do this across various match thresholds. This figure shows how false match rates increase when imposters are drawn from increasingly similar demographics. So if you start from the left, we'd expect a fully zero effort imposter pairing. Different sex, different age, different ethnicity would yield low false match rates relative to people of the same sex, relative to people of the same sex and same age, and then, as mentioned previously, people from the same family. Now, what this matrix is encoding is what happens when you compare two photos from two different people in parts of the world, and you do that many, many times. There are 7 different regions here, 24 countries listed here, and these countries were selected because they didn't have much immigration. So we think for those people being born there, place of birth is a reasonable approximation for race. And you record false positives between people, men in this case, between the age of 20 to 50. And we did this using high quality portraits. And we compared, about 500,000 images from 24 countries with another 500,000 images from different individuals from the same countries. So, I mean, it was just billions and billions of comparisons that we did. If you look at the bottom most left-hand corner, where's my pointer? So the bottom left-hand corner here is where we take males from Poland and we compare them with other Polish men, and we get a false positive rate of 1 in 33,000. And we set the threshold to give us 1 in 33,000 on that demographic. And then we compare Polish men with Vietnamese men. This is up the upper left-hand corner here. And we get a false positive rate that's a whole lot lower. So according to the algorithm, if this is a face-to-face authentication, a Vietnamese person would have less chances of breaking into a Polish guy's phone than another Polish guy trying to break into their phone. Now, the interesting observations comes when you look at the diagonal of this heat map, when you're comparing people from the same country and same regions. Now, at the fixed threshold across the whole thing, if you go to the top right corner, we're to the East Asian population, this false positive rate now is 1 in 1,600. But it should be 1 in 33,000 if there was no demographic effect. And we see elevated false positive rates in East and West African countries as well. So what this data says is you have high false positive rates in certain demographics. This is using one algorithm, but many algorithms exhibit this trend. Also, this figure is for men only. For the same figure on women, all of these false match rates get a little bit higher, like a factor of 4 higher. Depends on the algorithm. Women tend to look more like other women than men do look like other men. And that's an empirical result, and we don't know why. So this is essentially the narrative that has appeared all over the press over the past few years, that algorithms do give mistakes differentially depending on where you're born. And this is place of birth information. So depending on the application, the magnitude of these effects along this diagonal here, okay, are large enough. You've essentially got variable security depending on where you were born. Now, this is the same figure, but for one of the most accurate algorithms we tested. It's a Chinese algorithm from a company called Yitu. And now we see that the false match rates for the East Asian region is right about 1 in 33,000, which is about on target with the target false match rate that was set to the original 1 in 33,000. There's a little bit of elevation in a couple of the Asian countries, but generally speaking, false match rates have reduced to near target. And notably, there's also observed reductions in false match rate that applies to West Africa as well. So this is an important result that we found because it's sort of proof that algorithms don't exhibit higher false match rates in these populations, depending on the algorithm. And it turns out that some of the algorithms, particularly those developed in China, not all of them, they exhibit this behavior. So Yitu reported in a meeting in London in 2017 that its training data included about 1 billion photographs of a number of Chinese nationals. Now, whether that's the entirety of their training data is unknown, but these results are promising in that there's a potential to maybe train away the demographic problem. And there are companies out there that have been looking at this, and some have claimed to have been able to retrain their neural networks to address this demographic differential issue. Okay, so this is what happens when you match the same sex people of the same sex, same region of the world. Photographs of two different people of different ages. So along the diagonal here is when you match other people of similar age. On the top left-hand corner is when you match, say, a baby against a 70-year-old. False matches are accounted against a recognition threshold fixed globally to give a false match rate of 1 in 10,000 overall transactions. So we see that when we match people of the same age, say between 24 to 28, the false match rate goes up to about 1 in 1,000. So we're talking about 10 times bigger than the nominal rate that we targeted for in the first place. If you compare young children, then the false match values are about 200 times bigger, which is about 1 in 50 false match rates. So you've got a demographic of young children with high false match rates. Another demographic of elderly in the top right-hand corner, also higher false match rates. And then when you go across demographic, you're comparing people of different ages, then people don't match each other when they're different ages. Now, the ideal behavior for an algorithm, for any biometric modality really, is the entire square is a uniform gray color, that it doesn't matter what age or sex or where the people were born, false match rates are stable. But in face recognition, it's not really that case. And the other sort of ideal scenario is even if we see blocking occurring on the diagonal, as long as the false match rate differentials are 0, meaning in our case we see a uniform gray color across the diagonal, then we're also in good business. On this slide, we're looking at cross-age false match rates from 6 countries between males and females. When the nominal false match rate is set to 1 in 30,000, we see elevated false match rates in elderly Chinese women. Approximately 1 in every 30 comparison between Chinese women above the age of 65 will generate a false positive for this particular algorithm. So when you compare these false match rates to Polish men, we see false match rates below 1 in every 30,000. So we report the data, we put these demographic reports out there. We didn't analyze cause and effect. We published a report and we allowed other people to reason about what these numbers actually mean to their operations. So as I mentioned before, the consequences of these false positive differentials will differ depending on the application. So let's consider 3 different applications, right? The first scenario is here, say someone is trying to dispense drugs and FR is being used to verify that they are who they claim they are. The prior probability of an imposter is low, meaning someone pretending to be someone else to try and fill their prescription. You can probably say the probability of that is fairly low. The impact of a false negative, which means the system actually rejects the correct person, is saying, nope, I don't think you are who you claim you are. And the consequences of that is likely just inconvenience and having to provide some sort of secondary form of identity, right? But false positive, meaning someone else is claiming to be you, has now filled a prescription fraudulently. And who gets harmed by the outcomes of this? Perhaps some pharmacists who fill the prescription, or maybe the insurance company. The second scenario we have using FR to board a plane, right? So again, the prior probability of this is low. Most people who are boarding a plane, legitimately bought a ticket. Cost of a false negative is likely, again, inconvenience to the passenger and having to board with the paper boarding pass with the airline staff. But a false positive means someone unintended has now boarded the plane. Now, if ultimately the legitimate passenger also boards the plane, airline staff will likely be able to get it squared away with the manifest or additional proof of identity. But again, who is harmed by a false positive? Well, likely the airline for inconvenience. Now, this third scenario is video surveillance, where a system is looking for people of interest, for example, people on a blacklist. And the probability of a genuine, of someone actually being a bad guy is fairly low. The cost of a false negative in this case is that the bad guy goes undetected. But the cost of a false positive could be innocent people getting arrested. And those potentially harmed by a false positive are innocent bystanders. So if you're a biometrics professional trying to make decisions about security policy and risk, the numbers on the demographic differentials from the report might influence what you're going to do. I'll point out that the leading contemporary algorithms, and the key word here is leading, are very accurate. Some are not, and there's a wide spectrum of algorithms here. So the more accurate algorithms increasingly tolerate poor quality images, but they generally distribute errors inequitably across demographics. Some algorithms do better than others. There's obviously room for improvement. We found that false positive differentials are generally larger in magnitude than false negatives, and they typically carry more consequences. The algorithm matters. More accurate algorithms are going to give you better outcomes if they're used. This is why we should all be upgrading and selecting good algorithms in the first place. Demographic sensitivity is one aspect, but the key message of the report really is know your algorithm. Be able to characterize what the sensitivities of the algorithm to not only demographics, but also, say, low resolution images or off-angle photos, whatever applies to your operations. One-to-many algorithms. These class of search algorithms don't necessarily exhibit the same kind of demographic differentials as the one-to-one algorithms that we looked at. This particular class of algorithms do take active steps to stabilize these false positives. And some developers supplied identification algorithms for which false positive differentials were not detectable. Among these were IDEMIA, another one was NEC, and there were other developers that produced one-to-many algorithms with stable false positive rates. Obviously, the application matters. The reporting in the press has been confusing at times, and we've been trying to educate the media more about all of this. Future mitigation of some of these problems. Training matters, and there is evidence in a report that many algorithms in China do not give the elevated false positive rates on Chinese faces that algorithms developed elsewhere do. Improved awareness of the issue, obviously, but operational testing is extremely important. As I said, know your algorithm that's installed in your environment, running on your operational data, right? And there are various labs out there that support operational testing if you don't have the capability in-house. So it's imperative for folks to know their algorithms. If you really want to make face recognition better, you want more signals. You want more discriminative power from the biometric that you're sensing. So skin texture is one of those, but also iris. The texture of the human iris is known to have a structure that, when imaged and processed by published feature extraction algorithms, it will correctly discriminate between identical twins, something that contemporary face recognition algorithms don't have the ability to do. And I'll talk a little bit more about twins in a second. There are a number of cameras on the market that simultaneously capture both a face image and two iris images. So if you can do both modalities, you'll likely be in better shape in terms of accuracy. False negative error rates are often caused by poor quality photos, so therefore can be reduced in standards compliant images, and the use of face-aware capture devices that do exposure control to reduce issues associated with image capture. Higher resolution images. The human reviewer community has been asking for much higher resolution images for a long, long time. This is for forensic purposes. And higher resolution images support being able to extract skin texture for better discriminative power. In 2004, there was an algorithm patented that can correctly distinguish between twins. And it operates by extracting features from skin texture adjacent to the nose above the eyebrows, which segues into my next discussion on twins, what we call the forgotten demographic. One of the limitations of face recognition technology that we've seen is on twins. Twins are more common than most people would think. In 2017, about 3% of babies born in the US were of twins in multiple births, and the numbers of twins are increasing. Identical twins are always of the same sex. Fraternal twins can be of the same sex or different sex. Okay, so what we have here is a match score distribution plot. The colored horizontal lines represent typical operating thresholds where if the match score lies above the line, it means the algorithm thinks it's a match of the same person. So the first two distributions on the left are when you match images of twin A against another photo of twin A. And we expect these scores to be high and above threshold because you're comparing photos of the same person. The middle distribution is of fraternal twins of different sex. We see the algorithms doing the right thing, correctly assigning low scores below threshold to the twin comparisons. The trouble is when we get to the two distributions to the far right. We're matching twin A with twin B, so two different people. Normally, you would expect the score distribution to be low and fall below the thresholds because you're matching different people. But in the case of same-sex twins and even fraternal twins, we're seeing a very high occurrence of false positives where the algorithms think the twins are the same people. And the trends are consistent across most algorithms that we've tested, with twins being a demographic with a very high false positive identification rate. So here's an example, just data point of 1. We enrolled an identical twin A into a database of 1.6 million people, and we searched twin B. There's no threshold set for the search, so we retrieve the top 20 candidates that come back. And twin A comes back at rank 1 for all 3 algorithms, and the algorithms produce very high match scores, which means that they're pretty confident that twin A is the same person as twin B. This is an example of doing the same thing, but for a set of fraternal twins. But in this case, even though the other twin is retrieved at high rank, the match score produced by the algorithms are low, meaning the algorithms are able to differentiate between the twins in this particular case. This is me enrolling myself into the database and searching a photo of my sister. We see that I come back at high ranks, but the algorithms produce low match scores. So algorithms are able to just discriminate between me and my sister as siblings. And this information potentially could be used by investigators who are essentially doing investigation work. Okay, how are we doing on time here? Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is face masks. What happens when you cover 40 to 70% of the face and what that does to face recognition? So the motivation of the study, I think, is quite obvious. When we're all told, back in March to go home and stay home due to the COVID-19 pandemic, that was the beginning of the global practice of people wearing face masks in public places. And there's been a demand to authenticate people wearing face masks, for example, from trying to unlock your cell phones when you're wearing a face mask to using e-gates at airports without needing to remove our masks. And this presents a potential problem for face recognition because regions of the face are occluded by masks, including the mouth and nose, which contains useful information for recognition. So what we did was we ran a test where we overlaid digital masks over faces and photos, millions of them, and we matched those images, the masked images, against unmasked enrollment images. And what we saw was that face masks are not a good thing for face recognition. In the best case, when we compare unmasked to masked images, failure rates increased from 0.4% to 2.4%. So that's essentially taking the technology maybe back 2 to 3 years from a performance perspective. But some algorithms, however, are entirely intolerant of face masks, and failure rates can be quite high. So we did this for pre-pandemic algorithms. Some of the algorithms might still be usable, but most of the pre-pandemic algorithms we tested were probably not. Since the pandemic, we've received and tested a number of what we call post-pandemic algorithms. So, making the assumption that some developers are actually going to think and address the problem of face masks. And what we're seeing are developers have started thinking about the face mask problem. The algorithms highlighted in yellow are developers that submitted post-pandemic algorithms that have showed significant improvements in accuracy with face masks over their pre-pandemic predecessors. So this is a good sign. We'll continue to track the state of the art in this area. And we had published an initial report back in July on face recognition accuracy on face masks with pre-pandemic algorithms. And we will be publishing a second report documenting the accuracy of post-pandemic algorithms on face masks. And also looking at what happens when you mask both the enrollment and verification image. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about face morphing, which is another vulnerability of face recognition. Face morphing is the blending or merging of faces of different people. The concept of morphing has been around since the 1980s, and we've seen it used in special effects in Hollywood. And one way of doing this for faces is to establish key facial feature points, divide the face using triangulation, and then you transform and warp and blend the triangles from subject A to subject B. And one of the parameters that can be controlled by this process is how much each subject contributes to the morph by adjusting the blending alpha. So what are the threats and consequences? Well, if you blend myself and my colleague here, right, and then you try and match other photos of me against the morph, of my colleague against the morph, modern face recognition algorithms will match both of us against the morph. So let's say a morph photo gets onto a passport, for example. Now, multiple people can use that same fraudulent yet genuine document to authenticate, say, against e-gates. So here's some examples of morphs. Morphing is relatively easy to do. There are websites and mobile applications that will create sort of rudimentary morphs. There's also open source tools and published methods in the literature that allows for the creation of morphs, sort of in an automated fashion. And then there are morphs that can be created by hand using commercial grade tools that are readily accessible on the market today. And the morphing methods that use sort of landmark-based approach, normally it produces morphs with visible morphing artifacts, whether it's stitching artifacts right around the chin or the forehead or around the eyes. But you can fix that with manual post-processing. And then there's technology to generate morphs using generative adversarial networks, or GANs, which is the technology behind the creation of deepfakes. And the advantage of using GANs to generate morphs is that you don't get the traditional morphing artifacts typically seen in the landmark-based morphs. The sort of disadvantage at the moment for GAN-generated morphs is that they don't look as good or are as good as the landmark-based morphs at fooling face recognition. So there's more work to be done in that area, but it's only a matter of time, I think, before this, machine learning technology gets good enough that we could create morphs that can both fool face recognition algorithms and actually fool humans very well as well. So notionally, what's happening underneath the hood is when a face recognition algorithm matches the same people, we get this genuine distribution in the green here, high scores. When you match images of different people, you get low scores that fall into this red distribution. Now, when you match morphs with other photos of the people that went into the morph, the scores fall into this blue distribution here. A large percentage of the comparisons would come above threshold and be considered a match by the algorithm. What we have here is a view of current face recognition vulnerability to face morphing. Each of these dots represent a face recognition algorithm that's recently been submitted to our ongoing FRVT one-to-one verification test. We ran the algorithms against a number of mated morph comparisons, as well as a large number of mated and non-mated comparisons using just regular non-morph photos. On the x-axis is the false non-match rate, or miss rate, on just regular photos. And the y-axis is plotting the fraction of morphs where both subjects match the morph successfully. So we've characterized each of these quadrants here. The upper left hand means the algorithm is very accurate face recognition algorithm, but is also very vulnerable to morphing attacks, given it would authenticate a large percentage of the morph comparisons. The bottom right represents low morph vulnerability, but also means the face recognition algorithm isn't very good, given there's high error rates. It's likely just rejecting everything. And then we've got a spectrum of everything sort of in between. Where we would like to see the algorithms is at this lower left-hand corner here, with high accuracy and low morph vulnerability. But at the moment, I think it's fair to say that the more accurate the algorithm is, the more vulnerable it is to morphing attacks. Morphing is real. In 2018, a real case of the morphing threat made news headlines. A member of a German activist group applied for a German passport with a morphed image. They morphed a photo of themselves with an Italian politician, and they successfully got the passport with the morph photo on it. And this made news headlines internationally and was essentially a wake-up call for a number of governments that accept user-submitted passport application photos. Additionally, on the right is a poll from a conference last year that asked the audience, how many morphed face images has your country detected over the past 5 years? And the responses were non-zero. So this just shows that morphing can happen and is actually happening. So over the past few years, there's been an increasing amount of research on automated morph detection and how well it works. So essentially using software and algorithms to be able to detect whether an image contains a morph photo or not. So in 2018, NIST launched an ongoing evaluation called FRVT Morph. This is to do independent testing of morph detection capabilities. So right now we're testing two primary use cases. The first use case is single image morph detection. So essentially, can the algorithms, given a single image in isolation, tell me whether the image is a morph or not? And this use case represents an attack on enrollment. So let's say someone is uploading a passport photo to the Department of State. We want to understand whether morph detection technology can be used to detect whether the image is a morph or not and bounce it. The next use case is what we call two-image differential morph detection. So there's a case where the morph photo has already gotten onto, say, the passport, and they're trying to use it, say, at the e-gate. There's an opportunity to use a live capture photo of presumably one of the subjects that went into the morph to help the algorithms figure out whether or not the image on the passport is a morph or not. So the question becomes, with this additional bit of information, can algorithms use it to their advantage to do automated morph detection? So we've been running this morph detection test for about 2 years now. And initial morph detection technology we've seen includes using handcrafted features such as local binary patterns and binarized statistical image features to detect differences between morphs and non-morph photos. And this was primarily on the single image morph detection case. And I'll say that trying to detect whether a single image in isolation is a morph or not is a really hard problem. Recently, we've received a class of two-image differential morph submissions that uses open source face recognition feature vectors to do morph detection. And those results seem very promising. So we see for this particular morph data set, the algorithm represented by one of the dotted diagonal lines at a false detection rate of 10%, which is a false detection of 1 in every 10 transactions. The morph miss rate is 8%. Which isn't bad. So depending on your application, if your operations can handle a 10% or even a 5% false detection rate, this algorithm might be very attractive. But when you constrain the false detection rate to something more operationally realistic, like 1%, the morph miss rate spikes to now 100%. So while we've seen the technology progressing, morph detection is obviously far from a solved problem. Morph miss rates are still really high at low false detection rates. And from an operations standpoint, false detection rates have to be low because it can have a big impact on the convenience and even the usability of your system, because any false detections will require secondary processing. And depending on your application, you may not have the resources to support that in a big way. So we'll continue to track the state of the art on this topic and put out new results as we have them. Now, given automated morph detection isn't quite ready for prime time yet. Yes.
I have some question coming in.
Sure.
All right. So that's one. You mentioned there are independent labs that can help entity looking to run operational testing with the FR program. Mm-hmm. Where can I find more information about this?
Yeah. So if you send me an email, I'll be able to provide you with a bit more information on it. I know that there's an independent lab in Canada that's been very successful working with the New Zealand passport e-gate organization to do operational testing of their system. So just send me an email.
All right, and we have a second question. So first of all, brilliant presentation. And this person would like to hear more about the 12 to 20-year-old demographic group used in the NIST report. Since kids are undergoing facial changes until they reach the end of puberty, would NIST consider disaggregating this age group further to be able to tease out the age and aging effect of respective children on the false match rate?
Right. So so generally speaking, right, okay, younger kids are harder to recognize because of the changes that are going on, especially the larger the time lapse between initial capture and what you're trying to verify against. What we didn't look at is the effect of aging in this demographics report, but I will keep that in mind. The Australians have actually done some pretty good work looking at the impact of age and aging across a large passport database. So if you send me an email, I could point you further to those studies as well.
Yeah, Australia did it because they want to set the baseline of their passport renewal policy.
Yep.
There's another question. You say leading contemporary algorithms are very accurate. Can you provide a list of vendors that meet that criteria?
So our ongoing FRVT test has a leaderboard. So you can go to the leaderboard and look at it. The thing is that it really depends on your application and the type of imagery that you are trying to run your system against. So I will caution that you, again, need to understand what type of environment you're operating the system under.
Especially use case as well, you know, the
Absolutely.
database size, the use case impact a lot of those algorithms. For
Absolutely.
Sure. Yep. And I would say some of the NIST algorithm that it's featured on leaderboard, they may not be commercial algorithm, it can have research algorithm and so forth, but yes.
Yeah, so again,
the field is crowded.
Yeah, so Teresa brings up a very good point. So all of the algorithms that we tested, while many of them came from commercial providers, there's a high likelihood that they're not the algorithms that are currently deployed in operations as of today. So some of them are essentially lab algorithms that may or may not make it into operations. So it's actually quite important, depending on your provider, to ask them about, okay, well, you know, what version of the algorithm am I using, and is there a more sophisticated, better version that I should be using for my use case? Such as if I'm trying to operate on a large population of people wearing face masks, do you have a version, or do you have an update that would support that?
That's all the questions so far I have. Thank you, May.
Okay, I'm just going to wrap it up. This is my last slide on sort of other potential mitigations for morphing. So the ultimate solution is live capture. So if you make everyone show up to the passport office and you take their pictures, there's no room for image manipulation. So that helps with the morphing problem. But the issue is even if all countries were to go to live enrollment today, there's still morphs already out there in circulation. So depending on what your passport renewal policy is, you could have upwards of 10 years of having to still deal with this morphing issue. Trusted external capture is another option, but if there's no human in the loop, then we run the risk of presentation attack, which is yet another hot research area in face recognition at the moment. There's a possibility of running a one-to-many search on a centralized database, looking for multiple suspiciously high-scoring candidates. Because if you have a morph photo and both people exist in the gallery, they're going to come back at ranks like, let's say, 1 and 2 and at high scores. So it's sort of a low-hanging fruit thing. If you can do it, I would run any sort of application, I guess, photo that comes in through a one-to-many search on a centralized database. Obviously, this method isn't effective unless both subjects exist in the database. But it's obviously something that it's not very hard to do, and it would probably help in terms of mitigation. Okay, so we are running our second International Face Performance Conference this October. This is we've in collaboration with DHS and some of our other European colleagues. It's the virtual conference, and similar to the first conference, it'll be all things about face. And we have a draft agenda out that's available. We've got exciting tracks and talks on morphing, demographics, human-computer, and just it should be a very, very interesting event. So registration is free. So for anyone who's interested, please register and join us.
It's every year. I mean, when you organize it, the presentation are really top quality. Top researcher around the world will present. It's really good. Learning a lot about facial recognition. We have one more question. May, you mentioned that a couple algorithms are able to handle demographic effect 1 to n quite well. is this true when different demographic effects are combined? Same race, same sex, same age range? Why are the results more disparate for one-to-one matching?
Yeah, so here's an example. So at the last IFPC conference in 2018, a presenter from IDEMIA had essentially talked about their methodology on how they were able to stabilize essentially the false positive distribution for Black and white subject photos. And this has to do with finding the correct loss function. So this is the type of essentially training that can be done to sort of mitigate and stabilize the false positive rates that we saw in the one-to-many algorithms that we tested.
I swear, May, I did not tease up this question.
Okay, well.
that question didn't come from me, I swear.
I'll believe you, Teresa, absolutely.
We have one more. I heard that match rate for white men was higher than for women because women were not studied enough in AI model. Can you comment on that?
We don't know what the underlying algorithms are doing. So, I mean, we just report the numbers. Not quite sure in terms of what AI models you're referring to, but yeah, if you have, I guess, potentially further questions about a specific algorithm, send me an email and we can have a more detailed discussion.
So I would say from an IDEMIA standpoint, what we explained here, we did it also between male and female in general. And when you train your algorithm, you can also achieve that balance between male and female as long as you make the algorithm aware. It's not really about the data set. It's really about how to make sure what you're looking for in the algorithm when you train it. All right, I am just monitoring if there's any more questions. That's it. I have a thank you. Any more questions from the audience?
Yeah, and I just want to point out that, if anyone has any, follow-on questions later on, feel free to email me or send an email to the general FRVT at NIST.gov. We'd be happy to talk to you.
Yes, and thank you, May, for doing this webinar for Women in Identity, and welcome to the membership. You told us that you joined, and we are super excited to have you as our members. We always need the scientific fact and study and perspective on certain on technology, especially. So what NIST is doing is very critically important. So we appreciate your time and your effort to make this presentation happen for us. Thank you so much, Meg.
Thanks for having me, Teresa. And I'm excited. I just registered for your next webinar, so I will be attending.
Thank you so much. So this wraps up our webinar for Women Identity. I'm Teresa Wu. I am served on the leadership board of Women Identity. If you want to be interested and participate involved, please contact us. I also want to thank Caitlin, our IT support on Women Identity. She actually is behind the scene helping us making this webinar run very smoothly. So thank you, Caitlin. So with that said, we're going to close up this webinar, and we appreciate your participation. Thank you.